All right, guys, what's going on? And welcome to the Shift Fitness Systems YouTube channel where we help men over 30 look good, feel good, and get after it. And today we are talking about my 4 favorite unconventional pieces of training equipment that have honestly revamped my body, revamped my excitement for my training, and it also helped a lot of my clients gain a lot more mobility, a lot more excitement in their movement, a lot more athleticism, and just generally a better feeling of being able to get after it. So we're going to talk today about what those 4 pieces of equipment are, how you can integrate them into your current training program, how they may benefit you. Now, as a little bit of a background, I've been training since I was 14. I grew up in the gym. My mom's a trainer, so I have been in the weightlifting and strength conditioning environment for as long as I can remember. And that environment is predominantly heavy in the dumbbells and barbells category. Now, I actually grew up using machines, which is even more stability, even more rigid. But at the end of the day, I started to feel, especially as I got into my late 20s and early 30s, that my body just did not move how I wanted it to move. It didn't feel how I wanted it to feel. Sure, I had the muscle that I wanted. Sure, I had the strength that I wanted, but I had it in very limited ways. As soon as I got out of the gym and I started to get into my life, I just didn't feel like I had the oomph that I should have considering what I could do inside of the gym. So when I started to integrate these new tools, the rope, the mace, kettlebells, and landmines, I started to really notice how I could take the transfer from the gym and move it into my real life and into my actual athleticism, which for me is crucially important. So if you're anything like me and you're active in your 30s and you're starting to feel like not only bored with your training because, you know, how many bench presses and dumbbell flies and all that stuff can you do before you really just go, is there something else out there? So maybe you're feeling a little bit limited, a little bit tight, a little bit like your capacity and your ability does not match what you want to be able to do considering how hard you're working inside of the gym. I'm not saying ditch the barbells and dumbbells. What I am saying is that you can integrate these tools to create a more well-rounded training program, to create more fun in your training, and to also give your training a little bit more oomph and juice if you've been doing the same types of programs for years and years like I have. Okay, before we get into the 4 types of training tools that I like to use for myself and my clients, I want to talk to y'all about the 5-day email course that I built, which is 5 free exercise upgrades to introduce a little bit more excitement and athleticism back into your training. So if you're going to the gym and maybe you're feeling a little bit bored, but you don't have access to a lot of these unconventional tools, I built this 5-day program to give you some ideas about how you can use cables and landmines and med balls and things like that to spice up your training program. So if that's something you might be interested in and you feeling like you want a little bit more juice and athleticism back into your movement, then go ahead and check out the link in my bio, sign up for the course, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Let's just go ahead and get this one out of the way. I'm going to talk to y'all about rope flow, the rope. Okay, very, very simple piece of equipment. And now I'm not naive enough to think that this doesn't look like the modern fitness adaptation of the person who's, out at the festival doing the hula hoop, because it absolutely does. But at the same time, it has introduced tremendous benefit into my life and into my movement and into all of my clients' lives who have stepped out of the box a little bit and tried to integrate it into their movement practice. Now, over the course of my training career, I have met very few men, especially if they were athletic in their background and now they've been working for a while, who are not chronically tight basically everywhere, but especially in their shoulders and in their spine, all right? These are the areas after a lot of bench press and a lot of pull downs and a lot of heavy deadlifts that tend to get really, really, really tight and be taught to just brace 24/7. So if you come from a weightlifting background, the chances that your spine, your shoulders, and your core move with the amount of fluidity that would actually help you in your athleticism and your longevity is basically zero. But if you take this rope and you learn some of the basic fundamental patterns, which I have in my Rope Flow Fundamentals playlist up here, and you just start to integrate these into 5 to 10, 15 minutes a day of just gentle, easy breathing movement, I'm telling you, after a couple of weeks, your spine, your shoulders, and your movement will feel completely different. The benefits are not just loosening up some joints in your spine and helping your shoulders, which honestly is great in and of itself, but there's also an immense amount of athletic carryover, right? So athleticism is not just raw output, how much weight you can lift, how fast you can run, and how high you can jump. Although it is those things, it's also about your balance and your timing. I mean, just look at Alvin Kamara of the Saints. It's also about your rhythm, your fluidity, your coordination, your hand-eye coordination, your proprioception. All of these pieces come together to make you a more athletic human being. So when you're swinging this rope around and you're learning new drills and you're learning new flows and new patterns and things like that, your brain and your body are working extremely hard to try to coordinate everything so that you can create the movements that you're looking to use. And you're doing this for thousands and thousands of repetitions with basically zero fatigue. So for my guys who are overtrained or tired or are really tight after a long day, moving with this rope for 5 or 10 minutes absolutely changes the game. Now, if you want to integrate this into your movement practice, I think there's 2 primary ways to do it. Number 1 being for 5 to 15 minutes a day, take the 3 basic patterns, which again, I have linked in my rope flow playlist: underhand race and chase, overhand race and chase, and drag and roll, and just learn to flow with them. Learn to make it easy. Find the pattern and then try to make the pattern feel as easy as possible, like you could do it for hours on end. And then you can go a little faster. And then you can start to link the movements together, right? So you treat it as a movement practice as opposed to a workout. Now, the second way that I like to integrate it, and this is once you kind of have the basics down, is you put it into your workout, right? You can do it for an interval of 40 to 60 seconds, basically as fast as you can. It's a core-driven movement, and then you go from there into your mace work or your landmine work or some assault bike sprints or whatever, right? It's a flow practice that also helps you create a good amount of tension and a good amount of output without a lot of eccentric overload or fatigue in your system. All right, guys, number 2, we have probably the most badass piece of equipment out there, which is the steel mace. Now, even if you don't have Vikings in your ancestry, swinging this thing around is gonna make you wanna hop on your war horse and just start to pillage whatever is around you, all right? So the mace is basically a heavy steel ball at the end of a long stick. But I really love it because its uses are so wide-ranging, and just like the rope, what you train for is what you get out of it. I think the main reason that I love the mace is that it teaches you to work with the weight as opposed to against it. Bodybuilding and powerlifting are about creating and feeling as much tension and bracing as possible for as much of the time as you possibly can. Now, when you're swinging the mace, especially as it gets heavy, if you do that, you'll burn out within 10 or 15 swings. But if you learn to move with timing and efficiency, you can feel that a very heavy mace can actually feel very light for 95% of the movement. And there's only that 5% where you have to create enough tension to continue the momentum. This is super powerful whenever it comes to athletic, fluid, efficient movement, especially for my guys with tight shoulders and tight upper backs. The mace emphasizes a lot of overhead patterns and a lot of free momentum and free mobility in that pendulum movement as it goes over. And because of the disproportionate load it uses and the pendulum movement that is involved, it creates an immense amount of overhead shoulder mobility, and it really does a good job at restoring the natural motion of your shoulders and your middle back. This is crucial if you want to continue to heave a football or spike a volleyball or overhand slam that pickleball at the next Sunday meetup. Now, the classic mace moves and that you've seen all over the internet are going to be the swings over your head, the 360s, the alternating 360s, etc. But just like the rope, you can do so much more with it. You can do rows, presses, cleans, lunges, squats to press. It's a weight that you can use and do basically anything you want with, and also do the rhythmic motions of the pendulum. To make it light, you can focus on flow, rhythm, timing, movement connection, or you can make it heavy and develop some serious lat, core, and grip strength. When first starting with the mace, I would integrate it into a 5 to 10 minute movement practice a couple times a week, or into your warm-ups and cool downs as a way to get your shoulders really nice and loose, maybe after a heavy upper body session, or to get your shoulders ready to go into some bench pressing and pull-ups without having as much bracing involved. All right, number 3 is the kettlebell, and it's probably the most conventional of the unconventional tools that we're gonna talk about. It's basically a bowling ball with a handle. Now, unlike dumbbells and barbells where you're applying constant and pretty equal tension and pressure throughout the entire movement, kettlebells utilize something that I call impulse, okay? And so impulse is just going to be a quick moment of very high force followed by several moments of basically no force. So if you want to think about the kettlebell snatch, where I'm going to be bringing it from the ground or between my legs to all the way overhead, I'm not applying force once it's past my belly button. After that, the kettlebell is flying up and I'm catching it overhead. So from the swing to my belly button, I have a moment where I apply as much force as possible to get the kettlebell over my head. This is extremely beneficial for things like sprinting, for things like jumping, throwing, and a lot of other athletic movements. Now, this isn't exclusive of kettlebells because you're doing the same thing with barbells during Olympic lifts. You have a moment of force to create the momentum to bring the barbell up to your clean position or your catch position for the snatch. But what is nice about kettlebells is that because you can use it one side at a time, you can involve rotation. And rotation is a pivotal movement quality that you have to be able to carry out athletic movements outside of the gym. I can also, because of the mobility of the kettlebell, regardless of its weight, transition around the cardinal directions inside of the north, south, east, and west, which is going to give my body a lot more proprioceptive ability compared to a barbell, which is basically stuck straight north and south. Now, you can integrate kettlebells in literally every way possible, and that actually goes for all of these tools. But my two favorite ways to integrate kettlebell training into my current programming is by introducing it with a landmine combination on my dynamic lower body days. So I'll do some kind of landmine lift, whether it be a clean or a snatch, and then I'll go straight into a kettlebell complex where I'll use a little bit heavier weight, a little bit lower reps, and really focus on hip and leg drive and more leg dominant movements like snatches, cleans, lunges, etc. Then my second favorite way to integrate it is with high rep complexes on conditioning days. So I love a little 30-second on, 30-second off, where maybe I pair it with an assault bike interval, which is just an all-out raw power, basically no skill involved movement. And I go straight from that into a kettlebell complex where it's maybe a clean, a push press, back to a clean, back to a push jerk or something like that, where you have a lot of output, maybe not as much skill, but you still get to move in more dynamic ways than you might be with just dumbbells and barbells. All right, and finally, we have the landmine. Okay, so this has to be like picking your favorite kid, which there's always a favorite. But if I had to pick one out of all of these pieces of equipment, it would definitely be the landmine. The landmine combines all of my favorite athletic qualities and all of my favorite things to train. You can really load this thing up to build some strength. You can build some serious power, some explosive power, some speed, and just general athleticism and quickness all within this same tool. And it integrates these things into core and hip-driven movement, which is crucial for long-term athletic health. Plus, it's still a barbell, which is pretty sweet. With the landmine, by utilizing one hand and one leg at a time, you create more rotation in your body. You create more movement that is more like your gait. So when you're running and sprinting and then also throwing, using one side of your body at a time. I've also found that teaching and learning the landmine Olympic style movements is considerably easier to master than the same style movements with a traditional barbell. So a barbell clean and a barbell snatch are considerably more difficult in my mind, technically, than a landmine clean and a landmine snatch. And here's the deal. If you're like me and most of the guys that I train, you want to look jacked, you want to feel jacked, you want to throw around some weight, you want to be explosive, you want to let out some aggression, show some power, just do some dynamic, cool, hood rat shit with your friends. Like this tool, this movement, these movements allows you to exercise all of those capacities with a very low barrier of skill into entry into actually doing them properly. And so if I had to pick two ways I would integrate landmine training into my current program, it would be two things. One would be to allow me to express power through the Olympic style lifts. So as solo movements, whether it be cleans or snatches on my lower body days, I would do heavy singles or doubles and build up to a heavy set before I went to my squats or my lunges or whatever it is. And then the other thing I would do is I would integrate it into a more movement or flow session with lighter weights. So for example, on a conditioning day, I could do a landmine complex, a kettlebell complex, and then run for 400 meters on the treadmill, and then kind of do that for rounds, allowing some rotation, still using some weight, and building in that athleticism while also creating more capacity in my body. Guys, that's it for me. I appreciate you watching. If you want help on integrating any of these tools, then please leave a comment below. If you already use them, let me know how you're using them, how you're enjoying them, and I will see you next time. Peace.